tomorrow, so I'm going to make sure that that I take a dose of patience before I hop in the car and start driving to Rockville tomorrow. And then third, we have an office out in Wabash, which is actually up north. And Wabash, so Rockville, we've been out there since like 2011. Wabash, we've been out there for about a year and a half. So as Mendy kind of alluded to, my office, all we do is estate and elder law. And actually at the end of this presentation, I sort of I help differentiate what those loaded terms mean, because those terms get thrown around so often. And a lot of people don't even know what they are, or even what the differences are. So I wanted to help kind of explain the differences there. Our firm, Hunter Estate and Elder Law, I put my little insider secret in there. I don't even think Mendy knows this. It's very, very new. So we're actually going to be rebranding at the turn of next year to Indiana Estate and Elder Law. My husband, the lady on the left in the picture, that is Susan Hunter. Lovely lady. I've worked here for 10 years now. She's the founder of the firm, and she just got to a place where she got the itch to retire, and she retired and headed out west and now resides in Nevada. And about 3 years ago, my husband, who is on the right of that picture, my husband and I actually bought the firm. So we have been, like so many others, a majority of our ownership of this business has been navigating the crazy COVID-19 pandemic. But I'm grateful to say that we came out unscathed, probably a stronger team after. I always start presentations with, if there's any super duper specific questions that people have, I can very easily kind of mold a presentation to hit specific questions or specific topics that people want me to hit on. You're more than welcome. I keep seeing little chats pop up on the screen. So if no one has any specific questions right now, because you may not even know what to ask, and that's okay. If you do have any questions while I'm kind of blabbing, feel free to chat or feel free to stop me. Like I said, very informal. But if anyone has any super specific questions, I welcome you to chime in and say, Jenny, I get this question all the time and I don't know what the answer is. So can you make sure you hit on it? Is there anyone that has any questions like that? Good. I can only see like 4 people. So I don't know if anyone's like waving.
No one has put anything in the chat. So I'd say,
okay,
guys, how about, since you can't see our heads moving, if you have something specific, put it in the chat. Otherwise, if we're silent, you'll know we're good.
Perfect. Sounds good. Brooke, by the way, I was dying to know what all the things happening at the farm was.
Oh. So we went to this place called Wonder Tree Farm in Zionsville for the first part of our fall break this week. So they do glamping there.
Oh,
so I can fill you in on that later.
Oh, perfect. Okay, so I'm just gonna, there are several terms of art in my little world that people throw around all the time. And sometimes they're thrown around accurately, but a majority of the time they're not. So I just thought that we could just kind of go through these terms of art that are thrown around in my little space, kind of one by one. Like I said, feel free to stop me if you're like, what the heck did you just mean by that when you just said that? Okay, so first question, or first topic, I mean, is a living will declaration. So this, I hear clients all the time, they think a living will is, it either, sometimes they think it's like a last will and testament. They'll say, Jenny, I need to update my living will. And they really mean a last will and testament. I think it's just because the word will is in it that people get them confused. But sometimes they think it's the last will and testament, and sometimes they think that a living will does more than it actually does. So a living will declaration is a super duper specific document in that you specify, you declare what your wishes are in regards to artificial nutrition and hydration. So I kind of informally call it the feeding tube document, kind of a yucky thing, but it's a very, very important document to have in place. Even more specifically, so it only deals with artificial nutrition and hydration, but it only kicks in when that measure is merely life prolonging. So I always give the example. I don't know if any of you guys remember the name Terry Schiavo. I'm sure some people do. Terry Schiavo was a young woman down in Florida that, super long story short, she was on a feeding tube and her husband was wanting to remove the feeding tube to allow her to die naturally. And her parents were wanting it to be kept in. And ultimately, they started fighting. Husband and parents started fighting. It went through this crazy court battle. It went all the way up to the US Supreme Court, actually, which is completely crazy to think about. I always tell people, we got the opinions of her husband. We got the opinion of her parents. We got the opinions of several different judges and courts. We got the opinions of like every news anchor at the time. And there was one opinion that was the most important one that was missing, and that was Terry's. And this single document was the darn document that she was missing, because this is the one that declares what your personal wishes are if that kicks in. Okay. The living will kind of goes hand in hand with a healthcare proxy. You will see this document, that's the next term we're going over. You will see this document be named different things often. So sometimes you'll see where clients have like a healthcare power of attorney, or sometimes you'll see clients have a healthcare representative or a healthcare proxy. They're all the same darn thing. If they're putting someone in a position to make healthcare decisions for them, that is this document. Indiana calls this document an appointment of healthcare representative, but just because if someone has like a healthcare power of attorney, it doesn't make it like an invalid document. It's just not really named correctly. But like I said, this is the document that designates who is going to make healthcare decisions for you when you're unable to do so. So the last part of that sentence is probably the most important. If you're able to make your own healthcare decisions, of course, you're still making them. The purpose of this document is to put someone in a position to take the baton if you can no longer make your own decisions. I am a huge advocate for putting successors. So if, we have person number one serving as the healthcare decision maker, but God forbid something happens to that person. So a lot of married couples, they will put each other first, and just, people age, right? And a lot of times the married couple, the husband and wife, are relatively the same age or close. And so we always put successors down just to make sure someone is in a position to take the baton if something happens to that first person. Mindy, do you have something?
Yeah, Jody was asking, does an advance directive fall under any of these?
That term of art is collectively this healthcare proxy document and a living will. So kind of that second bullet under that healthcare proxy, this is the document that has kind of the everything else. Like with the living will, it has just the decision in regards to a feeding tube. But the healthcare proxy has the everything else. So what I mean by that is like DNR, ventilation, dialysis, pain medication. It's all those other things is embedded in the healthcare proxy document, and collectively the healthcare proxy and the living will are considered advanced directives. Is that the only question I missed? Okay, perfect. Okay, next is power of attorney. So Power of attorney is, when I say power of attorney, I'm talking more of the financial role. So financial and legal very specifically. So the power of attorney is the one that can step in and help manage finances or make legal decisions on behalf of someone else if that person can no longer do it themselves. So kind of the same concept as the healthcare proxy, it's just a different hat, where the healthcare proxy is the healthcare hat. The power of attorney is just the financial hat. This would be the person that I'm sure that as you guys work with clients, I hope as a lawyer, I hope you guys have some sort of contract in place, that you have a contract laying out the terms of the relationship between you and your client, you know, when payment happens, when what are we doing, all those sort of things. If you are working with someone on behalf of someone else, so say you're working with like the daughter of a client and it's, you know, say it's mom's house. If we're talking about signing a contract, that would either need to be mom if she's cognitively okay, or the power of attorney. So say the daughter is the financial power of attorney, she would have the authority, so long as the power of attorney is a good one, it's not a hunk of junk like off the internet or something. That would be the document, that would be the role that would give someone the power to like execute a contract for you guys. The power of attorney, what I mean by kind of making sure it's not a hunk of junk, is the power of attorney is a very specific document in that you actually have to list all the powers that you're granting to a power of attorney. So for example, like in that healthcare proxy, basically it's just general authority to say, hey, whatever healthcare decision comes their way, they've got the power to make it. The power of attorney, on the other hand, you have to list out every single power that you're granting to your power of attorney. And it's assumed, if you don't list it in the document, that the presumption is you're not granting it. And so, you know, say for example, there's a power of attorney and the person that executed that power of attorney didn't give, in my example, the daughter the banking authority. That's one specific power you can have in a power of attorney. That would mean, so if she is not given the daughter the banking authority, that daughter has no authority to waltz into a bank and conduct business for mom. So it works very, very specifically in that you got to designate all those powers. Currently, as we sit today, there are 20 powers. So I always say it's kind of a easy check. So if I meet with someone that has existing documents and they're just looking to see if the documents are okay and hunky-dory, I will immediately, when I get to the power of attorney, count. Because if I don't hit 20, I know I'm missing some. So 20 is what we're currently at. If we have anything less than 20, that means we're missing some. The last thing I always talk about with the power of attorney is that it terminates at the person's passing. I cannot even tell you how many times that my office gets phone calls that will say, I'm mom's power of attorney, she passed away, I need to meet with a lawyer. We of course know what they mean. They're going to need help kind of administering things following the passing. But the power of attorney terminates at that person's passing. I kind of informally say, when there's no more pulse, there's no more power of attorney. There are tons of lawsuits where people have appointed someone as the power of attorney, and then that power of attorney continues to act after someone has passed, and they didn't have the authority to do so. Some of those lawsuits are malicious in nature, and some of them are just truly accidental. But nonetheless, power of attorneys, these 3 documents actually right here on the screen are all documents that govern while we're living. And then at our passing, the healthcare proxy has a little authority granted after someone passes to deal with like funeral planning and things like that. But otherwise, these three are kind of considered done when someone passes away. Does that make sense? Okay. Yeah, Mindy, you're muted. That's got to be one of the most,
You don't know
that's
how
got
to
to be
read
one of the
lips?
most frequently used sayings in the last year and a half. Yeah.
Okay, so this is kind of good timing, I suppose. I had a phone call this week, yesterday or the day before. I had someone reach out to me, and her brother had passed away, but they had been estranged for years. And someone told her that he died. And actually, the landlord somehow found her, I think, and said, okay, your brother's passed away. So her and her sister, the family had been estranged, and they went to his place, but she said he was a hoarder, and things were kind of a mess, whatever. But she reached out to me about helping, and as I'm talking to her and learning, having her tell me what's going on, she said, we did find out there was one woman, we don't know who she was. We talked to her a little bit, but she's like, I don't want to deal with it or anything. Not married, was on the life insurance policy, but that's all they know. She said, so I guess we need to clean stuff out or do with whatever, maybe donate, et cetera, et cetera. And I said, all right. I kept asking questions and getting a little bit more information. I said, do you know, does he have any children? Not that we know of. Did he have any wife? Did he have anybody, anything that, do you have an attorney or anybody you can talk to find out any information? They said, not that we know of. And I said, I am not comfortable going in, and I think you need to be careful going in and removing anything or taking anything, because you could run into a problem if you find out later on there is a child, there is a wife, there is a someone. I said, I think you need to really investigate and find out, because if you do something and remove anything or take anything and you find out there is someone, you could run into a legal situation. And so I'm talking to her and her husband on speakerphone, and he said, so we would need to probably hire an attorney to look into this, and this could get costly, et cetera. And I said, yeah, and if you hire a professional organizer, you're going to be paying for that time. If there's items that, I obviously asked some hoarding questions. I told and explained to them there's 5 levels of hoarding, trying to find out, is this, some things about that. I said, are there items that you feel are valuable? Are there anything in there that belong to your family you're interested in? No, we don't want anything. We're not interested in anything. I said, do you want to invest money into all this if there's not even, and you haven't even been in contact with him for 40 years, And so anyway, I discussed some of this. Do you think I gave some sage advice? And, because I just, number one, I did not want to be involved, because I don't want to be, anyway, I'll stop and let me know your thoughts.
Yeah, it's actually kind of a nice segue to this next slide, but I would completely agree with exactly how you handled that. Unfortunately, there's I work with a lot of clients that someone was estranged. They're kind of navigating this space very kind of blindfolded, because they haven't been in that person's life at all, and they don't even know what is out there. I would specifically say it's a thing that we often deal with, because I would recommend to someone like that a probate estate gets opened, and we're going to talk about probate on this slide, because that's a court process that the judge would appoint the person in charge, so the executor, and the executor is the only one that has authority to deal with the deceased person's assets, even if it is just personal property. Because the last thing that the person that you were talking to wants is to be going into this from a good heart, right? Like they're like, okay, I'll step into this role to try to help, and then end up finding out that, that the gentleman or the person that passed away, maybe he had a will, and that will left things to someone else, and now they're giving away property that really should be distributed through the will. So yeah, I agree exactly how you handled that. I would get them over to someone like me, an estate attorney, to help them decipher what is the appropriate process to go through and whether or not they want to do it. There's nothing that says that they have to step in and do it. And that's really part of the, a lot of times attorneys are called counselors. And sometimes I feel like I'm more of like a counselor than sometimes I'm an attorney. And that's a perfect example of helping navigate that conversation of, do you want to do this? If you get nothing in the end, do you want to burden yourself with this? If the answer is yes, fine. If the answer is no, fine. It just depends on kind of what they're willing to step into. But I would definitely be searching high and low for some sort of estate planning document to see who is technically the beneficiary of all that stuff. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, because I told him, I said, he could have IRAs, he could have,
Mhm.
because he worked for a number of years. So, all
Yeah.
right, you
Yeah.
might forward the information.
The little, a little, it's probably not that earth shattering of advice, but when I have clients step into those roles where they have had relatively no relationship with the person that passed away, keeping an eye on the mail, like snail mail, is the best way to uncover what the heck is out there. It's becoming a bigger and bigger issue in my world because so many people anymore get things electronically sent, like via email. I'm one of them. Everything goes to my email. But that, if they would be willing to step into a role, that would be what I would be telling them to do. Let's start keeping an eye on the mail, because a lot of time life insurance policies, they'll send a quarterly statement. IRAs, they'll send a monthly statement. So that's the best thing to do, is keep an eye on the snail mail.
Okay.
And
Thank
maybe
you.
have it forwarded even if they want to take on it. But yeah. Okay, so nice little segue to a last will and testament. So this is probably the most well-known document in my world. This is when a lot of people say, Jenny, I need to update my living will. This is what they really mean. So last will and testament. And just like I was talking about with Mindy, that the will is a document that stipulates who you want to step in and take over when you pass away. So Indiana calls that executor role a personal representative. I always say executor. Most people know what the heck I mean when I say executor. But if I say personal representative, they're like, what in the world are you talking about? But that's the person that takes the baton after you passed away and is responsible from taking the estate from point A to point Z. So from like cleaning out the house, getting things sold, consolidating assets, paying off the debts, and administering to beneficiaries. They're responsible for the whole thing. And then the will, of course, also stipulates who gets your assets. So beneficiaries. One of the biggest misconceptions in my world is people think that wills just like swoop in and take over everything when we pass away. And that could not be further from the truth. A will, a last will and testament, only governs assets they've got to hit both of these qualifiers in one person's name, and there's no beneficiaries attached. So if I use Mendy's example, if they, in that example, they may, have an IRA, or they may have life insurance. Those kind of assets often have a beneficiary attached. And whatever beneficiary attachment is on that asset trumps what your will states. So I have seen beneficiary designations go to ex-spouses. I have seen them go to parents rather than children, because they thought that doing their will would just kind of wave magic pixie dust and take care of everything. Those beneficiary designations trump what your will states. So your will is only controlling things that are in one person's name no beneficiaries attached. So a lot of times, especially in like a married couple, a lot of the times, after the first passing, usually things are like jointly held or beneficiary designated to each other. And then the will usually takes place at the second passing, because at that point, usually bank accounts are just in the survivor's name. House is usually just in the survivor's name. And that's when a will govern. Last thing about a will is that it goes through a court process called probate. So many people, I hear this all the time, that they'll say, oh, I thought doing a will avoided the probate process. I'm like, no, the probate process is the process that appoints that personal representative, that executor. They have no authority until they're appointed by the probate court. And the probate court is what gives them the authority to administer the estate. So the probate process takes place whether you have just a will, and that will is controlling assets, or you have no will at all. Okay, so the probate court process happens in both of those scenarios. And there's a lot of professionals that will try to scare people away from probate. They'll make it sound like it's like this awful, awful thing. And instead of going as like a fear tactic, I usually just kind of explain to clients what that word means and let them decide if they care. The two big things that people kind of when they start talking about probate and why they want to avoid it, the two things that often people state are the reasons, or one, it takes a little time. Anytime you're involving the court and anytime you're involving a lawyer, things don't happen overnight. And there's part of the probate process that are mandatory kind of waiting periods. And so probate will minimally take about 6 months, but there's no maximum. So the longest probate case I ever worked on was 6 years. There's a lot of fighting in there. So that's like worst case scenario, but there's no maximum. The other reason people kind of harp on probate is the cost. And people think when I say the word cost, they're like, oh, the state of Indiana is going to, I don't want the state of Indiana to get my money. It's the legal fees. I always joke with clients, I'm like, you should be mad at the state of Indiana. It's the lawyer and their legal fees to take them through the probate process. What I always tell people, I think it's annoying. The executor has to hire an attorney. The executor cannot waltz into the courthouse and say, I'm going to open up a probate case. The court's going to say, you need to go get a lawyer. So lawyers have essentially monopolized that market, even in like the very, Pollyanna case where everyone is kumbayaing, everything's fine and dandy, still have to have a lawyer. And a lot of the times probate lawyers will charge like a percent of the estate. And so it becomes kind of a little costly sometimes. But I have clients all the time that say, Jenny, I don't care if my kids have to pay a lawyer to take them through the process, then so be it. And that's not my decision to make. My role is to say, these are your options and you pick from there. Last is living trust. So this is another term that gets thrown around all the time. When you really boil down what a trust is, there are really two types. There's hundreds of types of trust, but they can still be kind of boiled down to either being revocable or irrevocable, like on this slide. So a revocable living trust, if you ever look at like property records or something, you'll see a lot of people own their house or own assets in the name of a revocable living trust, because a revocable living trust is a very kind of commonly used device to keep us out of that probate court process. Long story short, what ends up happening with the trust is you move assets from the person's name into the name of the trust. And then when that person passes away, they, as a person, as a human being, don't own anything. Their trust owns everything. And then trusts are settled privately without involvement with the probate process. And most of the time without a lawyer too. The second type of trust is an irrevocable or an asset protection trust. This is a commonly used type of trust to gain us asset protection against long-term care, specifically like nursing home care, assisted living, or even home health care. This right here, this whole talk with long-term care and Medicaid is such a niche in my little world that there are tons of estate attorneys that do not dabble in this kind of Medicaid planning sort of thing. It's a beast. It's an absolute beast. And I actually give lawyers kudos when they don't try to dabble into something that they don't know 100%. But kind of long story short, what happens with this kind of trust is ideally this thing is set up 5 years in advance of any kind of need for long-term care. And then the outcome of doing a trust like this is if someone does end up going into any kind of long-term care or need home health care at home, instead of paying privately out of their own pocket, so pulling out their checkbook every month and writing a check. I don't know if you guys know how much long-term care is, but it's super duper expensive. And a lot of people don't have long-term care insurance because it's expensive. And so an alternative to when you start having this conversation is to do a trust like this. Because ultimately what ends up happening is instead of private paying for those kind of services, then Medicaid, not Medicare, Medicare is like health insurance. Medicaid covers for things like long-term care and home health care. Medicaid would cover the balance at the nursing home or cover home health care, for example. The other type of reason we do this kind of trust is a lot of people, if they own their own business, and they're concerned about liability, that kind of trust also protects assets against liability. We live in a very litigious society. People are very sue happy. And so when you're a business owner, or even if you're in some sort of high liability profession, like a doctor, a construction worker, anything like that, a lot of people will go also into this type of trust to get some liability protection. So if they ever were to get sued, their assets couldn't get drug into that proceeding. Any questions on these two? Good. Okay. Last but not least, I kind of wanted to explain the differences between, you see the office name is Hunter Estate and Elder Law. And I cannot tell you how many times I'm walking clients out of the conference room and they're like, Jenny, what is elder law? Is it helping old people like me? And that usually generates a laugh. And I'm like, actually, no, it's not just because it's not age focused. It's more goal focused more than anything. So I kind of broke down these two to kind of help explain, if you have a referral that you need to make, and maybe the lawyer only does estate law, but maybe doesn't dabble in elder law, that way you can make an appropriate referral. So estate planning and estate law is just either kind of planning for incapacity or planning for after we pass. So even if it's just like basic planning, like my bio said, I do a ton of like very basic planning for like young families that have, a couple kids, need to get their ducks in a row. They don't want or need anything fancy pants. They just need their stuff in order in case, God forbid, something were to happen. Sometimes that includes doing a revocable living trust if they want to maintain probate protection, so we're not going through that probate court process. Also embedded in the state side is like the business and farm succession. So we have a lot of families that are, farmers or business owners, and they want to pass the business or pass the farm down to their kids or their grandkids. That requires a very specific type of planning, and that's in that estate category. Planning for special needs, do a ton of that as well. planning for minor children, talked about that. And then lastly, under the estate umbrella is kind of the post-death stuff. So whether we're going through probate, because, reasons I've talked about, for whatever reason, we've got to go through that probate court process, we can help with that. We do it all the time. Trust administration, same thing. So if someone passes away and they have a trust and the person needs a little help that's taking over after the people have passed, needs a little help of, making sure the beneficiaries don't get their panties in a bunch and want to go after them. Sometimes those people will hire us to help them navigate the situation, just to protect themselves. And then under the elder law umbrella, as my clients joke, they'll say, oh, helping old people like us. It's like I said, it's not age focused. It's more, elder law is like when you're involving more kind of, I'm going to call them like older people issues. So when you're talking about long-term care in the future, and if we're talking about specifically that asset protection trust for like Medicaid and long-term care in the future, that is actually under the elder law umbrella. If you go to a normal estate planning attorney that doesn't do elder law, and you start talking about protecting your stuff against long-term care, they're going to be looking at you like you have 8 heads. That's under that elder law umbrella because it's a kind of a senior issue. Medicaid, so we help clients go through that Medicaid application process. So if someone needs to get qualified for Medicaid to cover long-term care, we help with that. And then finally, guardianship. A lot of people associate guardianship with minor kids, but guardianship is about the only time I really actually have to go to court. Guardianship sometimes happens when we're older, when we do not do things like a healthcare proxy and a power of attorney, and cognitively we can't sign those anymore. And if we can't sign them because the doctor has said, this person has no business signing these kind of documents, then I can't put my license on the line and say, oh, yeah, go ahead and sign these things. That's when a guardianship possibly comes into the scenario as an option to get someone appointed in a position to make healthcare and financial decisions on behalf of that person. Mindy?
Okay, Kathy and Jen have to run, and they
Okay.
asked a good question about how much is approximate cost of ballpark to sit down with an estate planning attorney to do basic documents, in case a client would ask us.
Yeah, so I always tell people that we do everything from a flat fee. So, and our first consultation is actually completely no charge. I do think that makes us a little different. I know a lot of, especially in this area, in the kind of Fishers area, a lot of estate and elder law attorneys will charge a consultation fee. There's pros and cons about that, just like everything else in life, there's pros and cons. But we have chosen to not charge a consultation fee for that first meeting. We pride ourselves in being a resource for people, and that's one way we can do that. And so at that first meeting, that first consultation, that free meeting, that's when, depending on what the goals are, I will say, okay, option 1 accomplishes A, B, and C, and according to our fee schedule, whether it's you or Bill Gates sitting in front of me, if we're doing the same thing, it's this fee. Or option 2 is, accomplishes D, E, and F, and that's this fee. Usually, just to kind of give you some ballpark, I mean, in the basic planning, so like kind of wills, power of attorney, healthcare proxy, we charge different based on if you're single or married, because if it's single, it's just less work. Usually that's like 800 to like 1200 in the basic planning category. And then when you start talking about trust planning, that's usually, revocable trust planning is usually in the like 2500 to I think 3500. I think so. And then the asset protection trust planning is usually about 4,000 to 5,000. But from your guys' perspective, that I always tell people, if you don't feel comfortable like giving those ballpark figures, that's exactly what that consultation is for, is to say, it's free. So come in, learn about what your options are, and those options will cost you X, Y, and Z amount. And if you turn around and I never see you again, that's totally fine. Or if you move forward, that's totally fine too. So does that answer that question?
Yes, perfect. And
Perfect.
it's nice that
Perfect.
you do offer that consultation. That's perfect.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like I said, there's pros and cons. It bites me in the butt sometimes where I'm saying like this person, I can't help them. But at the same time, most of the time, people really like having that resource, just to learn what the options are that are out there. Because one of my favorite things in the world is you don't know what you don't know. And it's my favorite. I love that saying because a lot of people, when they come in for that free consultation, they're scared. They're scared to, one, talk to a lawyer, and two, they don't like talking about this stuff. And so I think that, just our general vibe at the office and, just doing everything from a cards on the table. These are what your options are. These are what your fees. It helps alleviate some of that anxiety going into this conversation. Did I see another question?
No, Jen and Kathy said thank you. They appreciate
Oh,
the information, and it was nice meeting you.
likewise, likewise, likewise. But I think that takes me to the end, if I can, maybe. There we go. Happy to answer any questions. I did put my information on there, including my direct email address. I'm not kidding when I say that we like to be a resource for people. So if you ever have, you know, a, some question that a family or someone's asking you and you're like, I have no idea, but I can ask Jenny. Feel free to email me, feel free to call. Always happy to be a resource, and you're not going to get a bill, an hourly rate. So that's just silly. But yeah, so I'm happy to answer any questions if anyone does have any questions. Everyone's like, why are you talking about death, Jenny? It's too early to be talking about that.
And that's a scary thing, is you're never too young. Many of us have experienced it, friends and family, whatever. So be
Yeah,
prepared. And it's always better if you're prepared.
yeah. I'm constantly, I share that with my, my own family all the time. I'm constantly reminded of true, as cliche as it sounds, how truly life is so precious. And I mean, I just helped someone in their a couple weeks ago in their 40s that the husband had a massive stroke. They didn't think he was going to make it. He's now going to have a major surgery. I mean, and he's in his 40s. It's just, ugh. But I always tell people, if anyone's a podcast listener, I do my own podcast. It's called Legal Tea. And I talk about, if you're into like celebrities and stuff like that. I do a lot of celebrity estate planning, and I go through their mostly lack of estate planning. The one I just released, very ironic that you brought up the estranged family, Mendy. There's a new episode that gets released every Tuesday. And the one that just released, what is it, Wednesday, yesterday, was about a client of mine that estranged family. I'll just let you they're always about 15 minutes, so they're super quick listens. But the reason I brought it up is because the episode that released last week was about Kobe Bryant, and he actually had a relatively good estate plan. And I was sharing that it's one of the, as silly and kind of weird as it sounds, it's one of the kind of most beautiful gifts you can give to your families in such a time that they're going to be grieving. And rather than leaving a mess behind, Kobe Bryant I would give him like a B plus, like A minus. He missed one little thing. He forgot to amend his trust to add his youngest daughter, but she was only 6 months old. So it's one of the most beautiful things you can give your family when there's such a yucky nature if something has happened.
Legal T, T-E-A.
Legal tea. Yep.
Okay, I
Yep.
found
Yep.
it.
Yep. Yep. The little teacup. Yep.
We
That's
have
me.
a question in the chat. I don't know if you're able to come off mute. Who's on their iPhone? I just want to make sure we give you props, credit. You can throw it in the chat if you can't unmute. But it says, what form do I need to see from a client to legally remove items after a family member dies?
Legally remove. I would think it, no, I would think it hinges completely on whether there is probate involvement or not. If there's probate and the court has actually appointed that personal representative, I would look for either the court order saying this person has been appointed as the personal representative. In probate, there's a form or a document called letters testamentary that shows that they are the official person that has been appointed as the executor. If it's a trust, then it would be the successor trustee would be the one that would be appropriately the one that manages the personal property. So you'd have to see the trust document to see who is the appropriate person. And then finally, if someone has no documents, which happens a lot, kind of like, perhaps Mendy's example, the person that passed away may not have any documents. I would, instead of, just taking that client on immediately, I would get them sent to some sort of estate attorney to triage whether we need to involve the probate process or not. Because if we don't, then I would say the form would be a small estate affidavit if there's no probate involvement. But I would want that person to be triaged to determine whether or not we're having to go through probate, and probate would be the process to appoint that person through that letters testamentary.
I have a question for you. So I do a lot of financial organization.
Oh, I thought it was me, but I can see Amy's eyeballs moving. So
Yep, she froze. She should come back in a minute. She's
I
very
always
tech
can,
savvy, so she'll get it fixed.
yeah, I can always tell if someone freezes. I start looking at people's eyeballs. I'm like, is it me? Nope. Okay.
Or she may type it.
Oh yeah. Let's see if it's in here.
Not
Nope.
yet, but she'll get it.
Oh,
Am I
I
back?
think you're back. Yep, you're back.
Okay. Sorry. I was like so delayed on my end too, because I was like, why are they talking about me like I can't hear them? And then all of a sudden my screen said, your internet connection is unstable, which tells me my kids are probably awake and on their video games. I'm just always grateful when they're in school. Okay, so you probably didn't hear any of that, did you?
No.
Okay, awesome. So a part of the service I offer is financial organization with clients. So which is
Yep.
really more around coaching. And
Yep.
so one of the biggest things that we focus on is putting together a legacy box. And so I'm focusing mostly on helping women understand their finances and being proactive about that so that they're not worrying about what to do if and when something happens to their spouse or significant other, and if they're a single mom, just how to prepare for a lot of that. So in that case, let's say they're not like your traditional elder, right? We're helping them prepare proactively.
Yeah.
What would you say what would be your recommendations in that legacy box that of the first three things that we should be talking about when they're 30 to 50 years old?
From my world specifically.
Yeah, just from a legal, like to cover them legally.
Yeah.
And maybe not cover is not the right word, but just to help set them up. So that they can actually, I mean, my biggest thing is like, I want them to be able to grieve and go through and deal with the things that they're going to deal with when that time comes, whether it's when they're 45 or 95, right? And
Yeah.
so I feel like the will is
Mhm.
probably that's always been at the top of my list.
Mhm.
But what else? What are some other things we can be teeing up for them? Maybe they don't need to do them right away, but like, hey,
Mhm.
when you turn 55, you really need to be thinking
Mhm.
about, having this next thing in place or whatever.
Yeah.
I don't know. Are there
Yeah.
any like milestones, I guess, is what I'm looking for?
Yeah, I guess, well, I would immediately respond with kind of those basic documents would be the most crucial, like, tangible things that you could say, "We really need to get these in place, just God forbid something were to happen." And I would say, those first kind of few documents, healthcare proxy, the power of attorney, and at least a will. Um,
And that was like your
those
basic package, right?
Yes,
So that would
yeah,
be like a good jumping off point for them.
yes,
Yeah.
yeah. Um, I always tell people it's easier to work up, so, like, if we're talking, like, I just was meeting with someone yesterday that they're in between doing just a real basic kind of, power of attorney, healthcare proxy, and will, and doing some sort of trust plan. And I'm like, if you're not 100% on board with the trust, let's just get this basic stuff done first, get that out of the way. And if we can keep kicking that idea around with the trust, but let's get these basics in place at the bare minimum. Um, I would say I would also respond, so those would be kind of the more tangible things I would say. More intangible, I always tell people it's like the big life events. So I kind of relate this question to Jenny, how often, when it's usually at their signing meeting and we're signed all the documents, and they'll often ask me, how often do I need to update these documents? And I actually talked about this on Legal Tea as well. That there's some lawyers that will say you need to update them every 5 years or every 10 years. I don't really go with the whole number thing, because if there's really nothing changing, then there's probably nothing that we need to do, because these don't have like an expiration date. Um, I always anchor to big life events. So like new kids, new grandkids, someone's getting married, someone's getting divorced, we're buying a new house, we're buying a cool lake house in Sheboygan or whatever. It's those big life events that I always encourage people to retirement. So like to your point of they're hitting the 55 age, that's also a big time that sometimes people start looking into like long-term care insurance. It's advantageous to start looking at it sooner rather than later. Because the later you wait, the more expensive it gets, and the more expensive it gets, people don't buy it. And that's okay. I mean, it's expensive. I get it. That's why people do that asset protection trust. So it's the big life events that I always anchor to. And maybe it's something that, you can like create like a checklist of like, these are the things to watch out for from your legacy box standpoint. These are the things that you need to watch out for, the big life events that you need to kind of anchor yourself to make sure there's nothing that needs to be changed. The reason a lot of people will say, "Oh, update your stuff every 5 or 10 years," is because they don't think the lawyer, or they don't think the client will know to like trigger them to take a look at things, and so they kind of are saying just say every 5 or 10 years, because they're not trusting. I don't want to say trust in a bad way, but they're not trusting the client to realize that something may need to be changed. So maybe creating some sort of super cool checklist or something
Yeah, and I
would
keep
be
a checklist
helpful.
of what should be in there. I probably just need
Mhm.
to go through. There's some things that are really just a matter of opinion, and like
Yeah.
being an organized person, naturally, it's easier for me to tell somebody like, oh, like you should touch each one of these files every year and make sure, is there a life change that's impacted it? But somebody who's not designed that way naturally is
Mhm.
right. Yeah. So I was trying to think of like, what are some of the legal obligations in that box that need to be addressed? So that's
Mhm.
helpful. That's very helpful.
Yeah.
Because I'm the
Good.
same way. I don't believe like I don't think that needs to be changed looked at every year, whatever. It's
Yeah.
like life changes is what we tell,
Mhm.
I tell them too. It's like,
Yeah.
exactly, same things.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Awesome. Cindy, she's raising her hand.
That way I'm not like shouting over everybody.
You're
Um,
fine.
a couple things. I do have one question, but also I do think it's interesting how so many people think do something at 45, do something at 55, but you can be in a car accident at any age. You can, have a head injury, whatever. And of course, way back when, we talked about Emily having a stroke at a very young age on here. But just know, get a will. Just get a will.
Mhm.
Do these basic things. You need to have it. And I love that you
Mhm.
mentioned about the life-changing events, because people go through a divorce, people go through, having kids, etc.
Mhm.
Which reminds me, I got to check with my niece again, because I kept bugging her every year, get a will, and she's got 2 kids. But anyway, so remind me, because I need to connect her with you if she hasn't done it again. But so you've mentioned a couple times about long-term care insurance, and I need to look into that again, because it sounds like you do recommend that. If I'm hearing you correctly, and I'm 59, and my goal was to get it by 60, because I'm super healthy right now. And I know that could
Mhm.
change in a heartbeat. And my goal was, I think it's cheaper to get it under 60 and healthy. And, my neighbor down the street suddenly had cancer last year. And I think as soon as you have a diagnosis, it probably jacks up. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah.
What are your
Yeah.
thoughts on long-term care insurance? Just your own
I
opinion.
it a lot of my clients don't have it. Um and so a lot of the times they land in my conference room because they don't have it and they're really concerned about the cost of long-term care. What I always tell people when they ask me this question is it will open the doors to um more I want to say more facilities. So when I say facilities, I mean like nursing homes, assisted living. Because not when you do something like an asset protection trust, the outcome is Medicaid, right? Medicaid is footing the bill for those services. And while there are a lot of facilities that accept Medicaid, and there are more and more popping up because as boomers age, they're realizing long-term care is so flipping expensive, and they're needing to, we're needing more facilities that do accept Medicaid. So anything you think of Medicaid, just toss it out your head, because they're making drastic changes of, like, there's brand new facilities that are beautiful, they're good on the outside, good on the inside, and they are 100% Medicaid. What I mean by it opens the doors to others is because sometimes people they don't want to get to that point of having to utilize Medicaid as a way to cover those costs. And long-term care insurance is a way that you'll be able to perhaps be able to afford a facility that's private pay, that your long-term care insurance product is paying. Um, there are good policies and there are bad policies. What I think you need to look for is what the lifetime benefit is. Because a lot of times they sound really good on paper and it's like, oh, they're going to pay, this daily benefit of XYZ, but they're only going to pay a max benefit of 200,000. Well, that's only going to pay for like, and a nurse that's going to pay like a year and a half. And if you have some sort of, like, say you have dementia, a lot of times those kind of people will cognitively not be able to stay home, but physically they're quite fine and they'll be in a facility for, I've seen clients be in facilities for decades. It's terrible, but they're decades. So decades of paying is really expensive. So I would make sure the lifetime benefit is solid. And the daily benefit is solid. Because I see a lot of times those long-term care insurance products, they'll be like $150 a day. Well, nursing homes cost usually like $300 a day. And so it's just, they're good, so long as the numbers are good. I've even had clients where they will do that asset protection trust and say, to heck with keep paying this long-term care insurance premium because the numbers just don't make sense to me. I'm going to shift gears, do this asset protection trust to get Medicaid possibly involved down the road. Mandy, if you start going down that path and you want kind of me to take a look at it and just a unbiased eyes on the numbers and things, feel free to let me know and I'm happy to give you my thoughts. I just did that for a client last week. They're looking at getting long-term care insurance and wanted my opinion. And they were really the lifetime benefit was no max, like they basically will pay indefinitely. And the daily benefit was pretty low, but there was an inflation rider on it. And so those are hard to come by because long-term care insurance companies they're realizing that they can't keep up with the cost of care. So like Genworth is a really big long-term care insurance company, and they just had a massive class action against them. So it's, yeah. If you just type in Genworth long-term care insurance class action and Google it, it'll be like a million articles. It just happened like a month ago, maybe.
Interesting.
So,
Thank you.
yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome. Any other questions? I think I went over my time. I'm sorry. I'm a blabber. They're always
Hey,
kicking
I
me
would
out of
say
the
if there's
conference room.
If there's good questions, good discussion, we keep going. And
Okay.
if people have to go, they're welcome to pop off and go do what they need to do. All right, let's see. Brooke wrote something. Another good option if long-term care insurance is too expensive is opening a mutual fund or bridge account and put money into that monthly earmark it for long-term care. Then if you need it. Yeah, I know. I thought about that too. And I'm in a different situation. I don't have kids. I don't have all that. So yeah, different things for me to think about too. And I have some good investments. So I've got different things I've been thinking about. But as I'm getting closer to 60, I'm like, okay, let me think about some of that. So
you're like, oh gosh.
anybody have any other questions or discussion too? I haven't even looked to see who we still have on here.
Oh, I can't tell.
Okay, Brooke, no
Did it get
problem.
on the question?
Let me get this. Oh, we should get rid of the, well, she has to do it. I was gonna say we could get rid of the screen share.
I can do it. Here, I can do it.
There
Stop share.
we go. Now we can see people.
Yay!
Yay! All the faces.
Now we look like the Brady Bunch.
There you go. Let me think of anything else. Feel free if anybody, even some general good old questions. Well, I know I'm of course I'm an advocate for, and I think everybody we have on here pretty much has, insurance, a contract, and if you don't, you need both of those things. I'm a huge advocate of that. There's another group that I follow. I think a good chunk of us here do. It's a large Facebook group that is professional organizers, and most of the time we don't chime in, we just follow it, except recently I know a few of us did. But I laugh at it's so many people on there that just started professional organizing that probably shouldn't. Oh my gosh, the questions they ask or the things that they do, and I'm just like, really, why are you a professional organizer? But they're just kind of dabbling, and the things that they ask, and I'm just like, don't do it unless you're gonna do it for real. Emily?
Yeah.
I have so many examples of clients too right now where their parents passed, or it was a grandparent. Like one, it's done, but there were many lawsuits involved because the wife, who is not the mom, changed documents, had someone who was not really able to change the will. He was already had dementia and was in an Alzheimer's unit. She changed the will. And so many examples that I could talk about that are just so sad. But recently my dad asked me if I had a copy of his will, and I couldn't find it. We'd moved too many times. It was in my filing cabinet. But he's like, oh, we need to change some things. So his wife now who is not my mom died 11 years ago. And so I'm kind of curious, like I'm going to see him this weekend at this big family reunion. And I'm like, I need to bring up, what are you changing exactly in this will? Like my mom worked a really long time, and the agreement from the beginning was they were not going to merge assets. Her money would stay her money. His money would stay his money. We agreed to let her live in the house. If he passes first, she will live in the house for, you know, how long she wants. And then, yeah, I'm like, I'm curious if you have any tips for how to start a conversation with a parent about things like
Especially
this.
that. I mean, especially that, because it's such a it goes back to the you don't know what you don't know. And a lot of people don't know how wills, how I was explaining earlier, how wills play with different assets. So if they have like merged anything, that's going to go to the survivor. And people all the time, and I think I'm still a very positive person, but every year I get under my belt, I get more and more cynical. And the amount of times I've had clients where they'll take, you know, my kids will take care of it, or my wife will take care of my kids. We would have another hour presentation of examples where that is not played out. It has to be in writing. So it would be a conversation of and it's an in-depth conversation. And so maybe the reunion is not the place to have it. Maybe it's grabbing, you know, breakfast or dinner or something with your dad and bringing it up in a more kind of private environment. And just,
Okay.
I always say, blame the lawyer. Just say, I sat in this one presentation and I learned, you know, X, Y, or Z, and I just want to have a conversation with you about that, Dad. Because two things, as you were sharing, is I hope they haven't merged any assets, because so many people, maybe his will says everything to, you know, you and your siblings, but if they've merged assets, that asset isn't going to be controlled by the will. And two is if they're about the house. So if she can stay in the house, that needs to be in writing. That needs to be a part of his will or part of his estate plan to say, you know, this is exactly what I want to have happen with my wife if she's still living and I passed away. It is going back to how you initially brought this up. It's people, I don't want to say get weird after people pass away, but they get weird. And sometimes it's warranted and sometimes it's not warranted. You know, and that's why lawsuits start happening of, you know, say for example, there's nothing in the will about, and maybe the house is just in your dad's name. He passes and your stepmom is still in there. And if there's nothing in his will saying, you know, you have to keep her there, you guys could kick her out. She's technically trespassing. So it's having these conversations now, so we're not having to play cleanup and have really not fun conversations later. And I guess what I would specifically say, Emily, is I would do it in a more private environment. If you and your dad have a really good relationship, I think it just naturally would come, and just like I said, blame me and say you learned a few things and you just wanted to kind of chat through that with him, and just make sure that what his wishes are will actually get carried out, because sometimes wishes are up here and sometimes wishes come out here, but if they're not in writing, they mean nothing in my world. And that's when lawsuits start happening. And thankfully I don't do estate litigation. I'm way too nice and happy to do estate litigation. Does that help at all?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Thank
Okay.
you.
You're welcome. You are welcome. I should probably jump off here because I have an appointment at 10:30 and I always have to take a break in the little girls' room before and after every single meeting, like how a lot of women. So I should probably hop off.
Jenny, this was awesome. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much
Thank
for
you.
all the
You're
information. It was
welcome.
great. Awesome.
Good. Yeah. Feel free to call, email me. If you guys didn't jot down the information, I know Mindy has it, so she can always shoot you my email and phone number. So always happy
Sounds
to be a
great.
resource.
Sounds great.
Okay.
Thank
Best
you
way to
so
connect
much.
with you
Have a
is through
great day.
email.
I'm quicker to respond via. I always, if someone says that Jenny hasn't called her back or Jenny hasn't emailed back, it's because I didn't get the message. I'm actually kind of a crazy person about my email and phone messages. So I'm quicker to respond by email, but even if you guys do call, I absolutely call you. I'll call you guys back. Awesome.
Thank you
Well,
so
it's
much.
nice
Good
to
luck with the
meet you
rebrand.
all. Oh gosh, it has been a project and a half. I'm ready for it to be
It's gonna be
done.
great. It's gonna
It's
be
gonna
great.
be. It's gonna be. All right,
Congratulations.
you guys take care. I'll talk to you all
Thanks again,
soon.
Jenny.
You're
Bye.
welcome. Bye bye.